Welcome to this 365 Freedom Strategy session. Today we're breaking down the mechanics of calm learning and why embodiment is the ultimate unfair advantage.
It is really good to be here. And I got to say, just looking at the strategy we're unpacking today, it's really the one that separates the amateurs from the pros. It really is.
I think so too. And honestly, I want to start with the elephant in the room, the absolute paradox of the time we live in right now. Because if you look at it logically, just purely on paper, we should all be crushing it, every single one of us.
Yeah.
We have the sum total of human knowledge sitting in our pockets.
Yeah.
If you want to learn how to, build a rocket or bake a souffle or scale a sauce company to 10 million ARR, the blueprint is right there. It's literally a click away.
It is. The barrier to entry for information has effectively, it's dropped to zero.
Right. So the logical conclusion is that we should be living in this golden age of geniuses. We should be wealthier, fitter, smarter, and more skilled than any generation in history. But look around. That is not what's happening. In fact, you could argue we're seeing the exact opposite.
Absolutely.
We're seeing more burnout, more confusion, and more stalling than ever before.
It's the paralysis of abundance. And it leads to this very specific phenomenon that we need to dissect today. It's a modern belief, almost a religious conviction in the entrepreneurial space, that more information inherently equals better results.
That's the equation we all run in our heads, isn't it? Like, if I'm stuck, the answer must be in a book I haven't read yet. If my business isn't growing, I must need another course. If I'm not fit, I need a new podcast about metabolism.
Precisely. We assume the gap between where we are and where we want to be is a knowledge gap. But the analysis we are looking at today argues that for the high achiever, the person who is already motivated, already smart-tained, it is rarely a knowledge gap. It's an execution gap, and it's actually caused by too much knowledge. This is what we call the success trap.
The success trap, I love that term, but it's also, it's terrifying because it sounds like you're doing the right thing.
That is exactly why it's a trap. Think about it. If you were sitting on the couch eating potato chips all day, you would know you were wasting time. You'd feel the guilt.
Yeah, the friction is obvious.
Right. But when you are in the success trap, you feel incredibly productive. You're highlighting the book. You are saving the LinkedIn post to read later. You're listening to this audio at 2x speed while you wash the dishes. You feel like you are moving forward. But the reality, the brutal reality described in our notes is that these high achievers are drowning. They are stalling. They are just spinning their wheels in the mud of information.
It's the illusion of motion versus actual movement. I want to pull out a quote from the material because it really anchors this whole discussion. It says, "Mastery isn't about how much you consume. It's about how much you can execute without the noise of overwhelm."
The noise of overwhelm. That is the key variable there. Think about the acoustic environment of your mind right now. For most people listening, it is a complete cacophony. You have the strategy from the podcast you listened to this morning fighting with the strategy from the book you read last night.
Which is fighting with the advice your mentor gave you 3 weeks ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is loud, and you cannot execute with precision when it is that loud in your head.
So our mission today is to turn down that volume. We need to surgically dismantle what we're calling the binge learning habit, which I think most of us are guilty of, and replace it with the calm learning protocol.
We are moving from being a consumer of content to a creator of results. And I want to be very clear right off the bat. This is not about being lazy. It's not about knowing less just to know less. It is about knowing what matters and ignoring the rest so you can actually do the work.
Let's get into the diagnosis then, because you can't fix it if you don't know you have it. The material describes this as a syndrome, the binge learning syndrome. And the first major symptom is something called the emergency mindset.
The emergency mindset is fascinating because it is entirely self-inflicted. It's when you treat learning like a crisis. You treat a gap in your knowledge as a 4-alarm fire that needs to be put out right now.
I feel attacked. But seriously, I know that feeling so well. It's that tightness in your chest where you feel like you're behind, so you just have to cram.
Let's look at the case study from the material. There was a student, a sales professional, who was being coached. And the description of his physical workspace tells you everything you need to know about his mental state. He was described as drowning in study.
Paint the picture for us. What does drowning look like in a home office?
He is sitting there. He has 5 different tabs open on his browser. Each one is a different sales course. 5 of them. On his desk, physically, he has a stack of books on persuasion, negotiation, psychology. He is cross-referencing tab 3 with tab 1, trying to see how they fit together.
Okay, pause there. Just imagine the cognitive load of that. You're trying to learn 5 different methodologies simultaneously. Tab 1 says, always be closing. Tab 2 says, never push the close, let the client come to you. Tab 3 says, it's all about the pre-frame. Your brain has to be exploding.
It is short-circuiting. That is exactly what is happening. He is trying to synthesize contradictory frameworks in real time. The text says he was trying to memorize every tactic at once. Now, emotionally, what is he feeling? He thinks he's being rigorous. He thinks, I am going to be the most prepared salesman in history.
But in reality,
He is paralyzed. The Vegetarian loads it. Despite having all these scripts and triggers, he couldn't even start a conversation with a prospect.
because he's terrified he's going to use the wrong script.
Because he has no flow. He has no intuition. He's completely in his head. When you are in that state of emergency learning, your nervous system is in a sympathetic state. That is fight or flight. Your cortisol is up. Your focus is fractured. You are scanning for survival data, but true learning, deep mastery. That requires a parasympathetic state. It requires rest and digest. You cannot download a complex skill when your brain thinks it is being chased by a tiger.
That is a profound distinction. We think we can brute force learning with high intensity, but the biology says otherwise.
You can brute force memorization. You can memorize a list of facts while you are stressed, but you cannot internalize a behavior while you are stressed. And sales is a behavior. Leadership is a behavior. Copywriting is a behavior.
This connects perfectly to the hacking fallacy mentioned in the notes, this absolute obsession with speed.
Oh, the speed trap. It is everywhere. How I read a book a day, how to listen to podcasts at 3x speed. We treat knowledge like it's a data transfer, like we are just hard drives. If I just increase the bandwidth, the data will transfer faster.
I do this, I'll admit it. I listen to podcasts at 1.5x speed because I feel like I'm saving time. Are you telling me that's useless?
I am asking you, what is the goal? Is the goal to have the audio waves hit your eardrum? Or is the goal to change your life? The expert commentary in the notes here is very blunt. It says, frantic learning leads to shallow skills.
Shallow skills. Ouch, that hurts.
Think about a funnel. You have a bottle, that is your brain. You have a funnel. If you pour water, which represents information, into that funnel gently, it flows smoothly into the bottle. If you take a fire hose and blast water at the funnel, what happens?
It sprays everywhere. Most of it hits the floor.
Exactly. You make a huge mess, you feel wet, you feel like you've been immersed in water, but the bottle is still empty. The speed of consumption degrades the quality of retention. You are not giving your brain the milliseconds it needs to index the information, connect it to what you already know, and file it away for retrieval. You are just flushing it through your short-term memory buffer.
So we're basically just renting the information for about 20 minutes, feeling really smart, and then forgetting it completely.
And then immediately searching for the next hit, because the feeling of being smart faded.
That leads perfectly into the other character in our diagnosis section, the founder. This story really resonated with me because it feels so respectable.
Yes, the productive procrastinator.
So this founder was listening to 3 podcasts a day, every single day. Commute, gym, lunch. Constant input.
And again, let's look at the self-talk. What is he telling himself?
He's telling himself he's dedicated. He's telling himself he's getting an edge. He's staying current.
Staying current. That is a very dangerous phrase. The source says that while he felt productive, he was actually just cluttering his mind. But here's the psychological kicker, and this is where we have to be really honest with ourselves. The text says he was using study as a way to avoid the discomfort of practice.
Whoa. Okay, let's leave that hanging in the air for a second. Using study to avoid the discomfort of practice. That's heavy.
It is a defense mechanism. Think about the nature of the activities. Listening to a podcast about business strategy, safe, passive. You are in total control. The podcaster cannot reject you. The book cannot tell you that your idea is bad. It is a warm bath of confirmation bias and dopamine.
But executing, calling the client, launching the ad.
That is high risk. That is uncomfortable. You might fail. You might look stupid. You might lose money. So what do? We say, I'm not ready yet. I need to do a little more research. I need to listen to one more episode to make sure I have the strategy right. We hide in the information.
We're buffering. We're endlessly buffering.
We are buffering. And the takeaway here is crucial. Studying the how-to is often the biggest obstacle to doing the how, because execution feels heavy. It feels gritty. Information feels light and airy. We naturally gravitate toward the light, even if the heavy is where the actual money is.
It's not just internal, though, is it? It's not just us fighting our own brains. There is an entire environment that feeds this. We have to talk about the peer pressure loop.
We do. We are social animals. We look at the herd to see what we should be doing. And the herd is currently screaming, consume.
The notes mention a student who felt he was falling behind. And the trigger wasn't that his business was failing. The trigger was social media.
It's the book stack flex. You see it on LinkedIn every day. Someone posts a photo of 12 books and says, here's my reading list for January. Or they post a screenshot of a certificate from a new masterclass.
And you're sitting there. Maybe you're actually working on your product, but you see that, and what happens?
FOMO. Deep, primal fear. They know something I don't know. If they are reading that and I am not, they will win and I will lose. It's a zero-sum game mentality.
So the student, seeing this, what did he do? He didn't just feel bad, he changed his behavior.
He reacted with absolute panic. He ramped up his study time to 4 hours a day.
4 hours. That is half a standard workday.
It was massive. He was grinding, he was sacrificing sleep, sacrificing leisure, probably sacrificing family time. He was putting in the reps, or so he thought.
And the result, this is the part that breaks your heart.
Flatline. His sales numbers didn't move an inch. Despite 4 hours of daily input, the output was zero.
How is that possible? How can you put in 4 hours of learning and get absolutely no better?
Because, as the analysis points out, learning was actually his greatest distraction. If you work an 8-hour day and you spend 4 hours studying, you have 4 hours left to work. But your brain is fried from the studying. Your cognitive load is maxed out, so you are probably operating at 50% capacity. So really, you are doing 2 hours of actual focused work.
While your competitor, who maybe didn't read anything today, spent 8 hours selling.
Exactly. And the competitor learned more about sales in those 8 hours of doing than you learned in your 4 hours of reading. Because the market is the ultimate teacher, not the book.
There's a line in the notes here that really stands out. Overwhelmed by what you don't know. That's a sign you're trying to learn too much at once.
We look at the mountain of human knowledge. We look at everything we could know. And we feel small. So we try to swallow the mountain. But you cannot swallow a mountain. You can only climb it one step at a time. The overwhelm is a clear signal that your aperture is too wide. You are trying to take in the whole landscape when you should just be looking at your feet.
I think we've effectively diagnosed the illness. We've got the binge learning syndrome. We've got the emergency mindset. We've got the peer pressure loop. It's a recipe for exhaustion and poverty, frankly.
It is. It is the path to being the smartest broke person in the room.
So let's pivot. Let's talk about the cure. The sources call it calm learning. And I have to say, just the name lowers my blood pressure a little bit.
It should. That is the entire point.
How do we define it? What is the actual protocol?
The definition is simple, but deceptively difficult to execute. It is picking one lane and staying in it until you've mastered the terrain.
One lane, just one.
One, not three. Not one main lane and 2 side hustles. One lane. The strategy is built on the premise that depth always beats breadth in the wealth game.
Explain that, because I think generalists would argue with you. They'd say, I need to know a little bit about everything to run a business.
You need to be aware of everything, but you get paid for what you master. Think of it like drilling for oil. If you dig 100 holes that are 1 foot deep, what do you have? You have a backyard full of tripping hazards. You have a mess. If you dig 1 hole that is 100 feet deep, you strike oil. Calm learning is the discipline of drilling that 1 deep hole.
It's a shift from constant consumption to focused, unhurried practice. That word, unhurried, keeps coming up in the source material.
It is the antidote. You cannot rush depth. You can rush surface area. You can paint a wall fast. You cannot build a foundation fast.
Let's look at the stripping away process. We go back to our drowning student, the guy with the 5 tabs open. How did they fix him? Because if you just told him, stop studying, he probably would have had a panic attack.
It was an intervention. They didn't give him better time management tips. They didn't teach him how to speed read. They stripped everything away. They made him close the tabs. They made him put the books on the shelf. They focused him on one single skill.
And what was the skill?
The art of the discovery question. That is it. Not the close, not the objection handling, not the follow-up, just the ability to ask a profound question that opens up the client.
So he went from trying to be the Wolf of Wall Street to just being the guy who asks good questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the method wasn't read 10 books on questioning. The method was practicing that specific skill with unhurried clarity until it became muscle memory.
Muscle memory.
Yeah.
That implies he wasn't consciously thinking about it anymore.
That is the goal. Think about a pro athlete, a basketball player shooting a free throw. Are they thinking about the physics of the arc? Are they thinking about the chapter in the book about wrist mechanics? No. They're just shooting. The body knows. The mind is quiet. That is where high performance actually happens.
And what was the result for the student?
A total shift. not just in sales, but in confidence. The source says he didn't need 1,000 tactics. He needed the calm learning of one core truth. Once he mastered that one piece, he realized he could master the next piece. The panic subsided.
It's interesting. By doing less, he became more.
He became effective. That is the fundamental difference.
Now, there was a radical change in his schedule, too. We have to talk about the time management shift. Remember, he was doing 4 hours a day of study.
The productive procrastination block.
Right. What was the new rule?
They cut him off. They limited his study time to strictly 30 minutes a day.
30 minutes? That's a drastic cut. That's like putting an alcoholic on 1 sip of beer a day.
It is a detox. And I guarantee you the first week he felt withdrawal. He probably felt like he was being incredibly lazy. I'm only reading for 30 minutes. I should be doing more.
But where did the time go? The other 3.5 hours?
It was reallocated to deliberate, unhurried practice.
Practice, meaning doing the actual job.
Doing the job, reviewing his calls, role-playing, writing out his questions, actual work.
So the ratio totally flipped. It went from 90% input and 10% output to 10% input and 90% output.
Precisely. And the why is explained perfectly in the text. When you stop trying to learn everything, you start mastering the things that matter. The energy shifted from rushed and anxious to steady.
Steady. That word stands out to me. We praise fast. We praise disruptive. We rarely praise steady.
Because steady isn't sexy. Steady doesn't look cool on an Instagram reel. But steady builds empires. Volatility kills compounding. If you are frantic, you are volatile. If you're steady, you compound.
This brings us to the philosophical core of this whole strategy session. Section 4. Embodiment versus intellectualization.
This is the concept that changes everything.
The text highlights this phrase. Stop trying to finish the book. Start trying to embody the lesson.
Let's sit with that. Stop trying to finish the book. We treat books like trophies, like notches on a bedpost. I read 50 books this year. Great. Did you change your behavior 50 times? Probably not. You just ran your eyes over 50 sets of pages.
It's the difference between knowing the map and walking the terrain.
Intellectualization is knowing the name of the bird. You can point to it and say, that is a blue jay. Embodiment is knowing how to fly. It is a completely different relationship with the information. The analysis unpacks this as the difference between knowing a concept and sitting with it until it becomes part of your identity.
Part of your identity. So it's not something you do, it's something you are.
Exactly. When you embody a skill, you don't have to remember to do it. You don't need a checklist on your desk. It is just who you are. If you are an embodied listener, you don't have to tell yourself, make eye contact, nod your head. You just listen.
And the argument here is that this state embodiment only happens when you remove the pressure.
It requires space. The text calls it creating space for excellence. You cannot embody a skill when you are frantic. When you are rushing to the next chapter, you are by definition not sitting with the current one. You are evicting the lesson before it has even moved in.
And there is a hard economic reality to this, too. This isn't just Zen philosophy. Clients feel this.
They absolutely do. The source puts it very bluntly. The market doesn't pay for what you know. It pays for what you can do with unhurried clarity.
Unhurried clarity. I want to buy that. If I'm hiring a consultant or a lawyer or a doctor, I don't want the guy who is frantic and citing 50 different studies he read last night. I want the guy who looks at me and says, I know exactly what the problem is. I know exactly how to fix it.
You pay for certainty. Wealth is built through the calm learning of high-value skills. It is asset construction. The text compares learning to building a brick wall.
I love this analogy. Break it down for us.
Most people learn like they are dumping a dump truck of bricks onto a construction site. Just a giant pile of rubble. Look at all my bricks. Look at all my knowledge. But you can't live in a pile of bricks.
A wall requires laying one brick, mortaring it, leveling it, letting it set, then laying the next one.
That is calm learning. It is slow. It is methodical. But at the end, you have a wall that can withstand a hurricane. The guy with the pile of bricks just has a mess.
And if you keep dumping bricks, more info, you just make a bigger mess. You don't get a building.
Correct. You just get buried.
Okay, I'm sold on the philosophy. I don't want to be buried. I want the wall. So let's get tactical. Section 5 is about implementation. How do you actually do this tomorrow morning?
It starts with a mantra. If you take nothing else away, take this. Master the move before you move on.
Master the move before you move on. It rhymes, so it must be true. But seriously, that's hard. Because moving on is where the dopamine is. Moving on feels like progress.
But it is false progress. The progression laid out in the strategy is very clear. 1, master the basics. 2, master the nuance. 3, then win. Most people want to skip steps 1 and 2 and go straight to winning. Or they master the basics, they get bored, so they skip the nuance. But the money is in the nuance.
So what is the daily objective? The source gives a very specific challenge.
It does. And it is deceptively simple. Step 1. Identify one core skill in your business that is not fully mastered. Just one.
And that's hard right there, because I can think of 10 things I suck at right now.
Pick the one that moves the needle the most. Is it closing? Is it writing headlines? Is it delegating? Pick one.
Got it. Step 2.
Step 2. Spend 15 minutes practicing it today.
Wait, 15 minutes? We talked about 30 minutes earlier, now we're down to 15. That sounds almost too easy.
But here's the condition. It must be done with total, unhurried clarity.
Explain that. What does that actually look like in a home office?
It means for 15 minutes, the phone is in the other room. The internet is off. You are not multitasking. You are deeply, profoundly focused on that one micro skill. If it's writing headlines, you're writing headlines for 15 minutes with the intensity of a diamond cutter.
I bet 15 minutes of that feels longer than an hour of normal distracted work.
It is exhausting. It is cognitively demanding. That is exactly why it works. It is deep work, not shallow work.
But then comes the fear. We have to address the FOMO again, because if I'm spending 2 weeks just mastering headlines, surely I'm missing out on the new AI revolution happening on Twitter.
The fear is real. If I slow down, I will be left behind. But the expert reassurance here is powerful. It says, you don't need the newest tactic. You need a foundation that doesn't crumble when the pressure's on.
Tactics change, foundations don't.
Tactics are fashion. They come and go. Foundations are architecture. They stay. If you master the psychology of persuasion, it doesn't matter if you were selling on the phone, on Zoom, or via a neural link in the year 2050. The foundation is the same.
And the final piece of advice on simplifying the practice. The text has a litmus test for us.
Yes. If learning leaves you paralyzed, it's noise, not education.
That is something to tape to your monitor. If you feel paralyzed, stop. You aren't learning, you're just consuming noise.
Real education empowers. It creates movement. It creates agency. If you finish a study session and you feel smaller or more confused or more stuck, you have ingested a toxin, not a nutrient.
We have covered a lot of ground today. We started with the binge learning epidemic, the race, the emergency, the hacking, that false belief that we are just one course away from salvation.
And we contrasted that with the calm learning protocol. Unhurried, asset-based, embodiment, clarity. Moving from the panic of the student with 5 tabs open to the confidence of the master with one move.
It's a fundamental shift from being a hoarder of information to being a builder of skill.
That is the essential shift.
I want to leave you with a final thought, a provocation, really, straight from the material we've been looking at.
The question you must ask yourself today, and be brutally honest, is this. Are you collecting information, or are you building a skill? Because you cannot do both at the same time. One requires speed and volume, the other requires slowness and depth. The market does not care what you have collected, it only cares what you have built.
The answer isn't in your podcast queue.
No, the answer is in the practice. It is in the doing.
If you're ready to implement the Calm Learning Protocol, visit 365 Freedom online. This has been another 365 Freedom Strategy session.